right, everyone. I think we've got. Hello? I don't love yelling, so that's about as loud as I'll get. I think we've got everybody. Somebody is not going to be present today in class, so I'm going to record this because dang, I hate repeating this kind of stuff after 3 classes. So I'm just going to go ahead and record it. I'll also post it, so if you need to rewatch it. I do not go word by word with the syllabus. There's just too much. So I'll go over the basics, and then of course, this is, remember, an agreement between you and me, so make sure you do read it more carefully than what I'm going to do. I'm just kind of hitting the most important aspects. So first of all, for this class, you're in Digital Foundations. Yes, everybody, there at spot. This class, second of all, which some people don't realize, because it's not like a noticeable thing when you're registering, this is a hybrid class. So what that means is for this particular class, I am present in this classroom for every class period, unless I'm sick. But you don't have to be. I have a very carefully orchestrated calendar that shows you what days you need to be here and what days you're welcome to be here. I actually heavily recommend that you do use this classroom. Those who do get their work done basically during class period most of the time. I'm here to help. It's immediate. You don't have to wait to get a hold of me or wait till the next class period. So I'd say usually about a third of the class is always here. It's typically how it works out, and then the rest of you kind of come and go as you need help on the days that you're not required to be here. So attendance is really important on the days you're required to be here. There's a very, it's really important that you're here. So here's the issue that comes with hybrids. People look at the class and they're like, oh, okay, I can work these days during this time. Don't do that. This is still class time. You should still be working on classwork. The moment you agree to work some of these times, guaranteed your boss will F that up and they will schedule you on the time but the wrong day, and then that's not an excuse to miss class. Do not schedule yourself to work ever during these times. The other thing is sometimes schedules change. Little things could happen. Who knows? We have to be prepared for all the crazy inevitability nowadays. But especially if I get sick, my kids are little, and one of them just started preschool. She just is sick all the time. It's like a revolving. I just had her go back to class today. She was sick the last 2 days. For days that I am unavailable, either due to my own sickness or my kids, then I do video stuff. I'll send you videos if there's content I needed to cover. But I prefer to do it in person because you guys are going to get a lot of videos from me already. So I don't like missing days where attendance is required. Always check your emails before you get to class just to make sure that I really am here. For the work days, I'll even let you know, okay, you don't have to be in class today, but I won't be available to help you in person. I can Zoom, if needed during class time. So you just have to email me and set those things up. So those are some important factors about the class. So a majority of your learning will happen for the technical things like the demos on software. That's on video. It works out perfectly because you can pause when you need to. You can review when you need to. This class used to just be a regular studio class, and then I had a student who was abroad who needed me to record everything. So I was recording stuff, also just posting it in the classroom, and I was getting these high watch numbers. I'm like, what's going on? And the students in the class were just rewatching the videos because they, for those who haven't done it before, sometimes it's intimidating to ask me to pause, like can you back up and show me? I got lost, right? You don't want to do that in a classroom of people sometimes. So in the end, I found that for mine, it worked out perfectly to have it be a hybrid. I also teach this completely online, sometimes during the summer and sometimes during winter. So just so you know how it developed, it just makes sense because of the techie stuff that we're doing. And then what you guys come to class for are the intro videos. There's some things I know that people skip maybe a little too much. So I want to make sure you do get the stuff that isn't super pertinent right to the particular project you're walking through with me via video. And then also for critiques are really important. They in some ways are show and tell. Here's what I did with what you asked me to do, right? And so it's really fun to see how other people think differently and interpret differently and took a different approach and all that. So critiques are, I'll show you guys like which ones we'll do critiques for and all that. Masking, obviously it's not a requirement right now, but please don't feel weird to do it. So especially, some people really can get sick more easily than others. I will wear them sometimes. My partner is in healthcare, and again, if my kids have been sick recently, I'll probably wear a mask, because on help days, I'm right there by you. I'm not like up here. I'm right next to you. I don't want you to get sick from me. Or let's say that you are susceptible to allergies and you sniffle a lot, and if you feel like, maybe that sounds like I have a cold, if you feel like it would make people feel more at ease, just wear a mask. Then they don't have to feel so bad. So don't feel weird about wearing masks. Even the majority of us probably won't. There are times when you might need to. For the course description, the bulletin version is super short, but basically, we're going to throw a lot at you. We're going to see, some of you guys will respond to certain software more than others, but basically I developed this course for people who aren't designers but need to do design stuff, because it's almost inevitable. Like, we're doing it whether we want to or not. We're doing it on social media all the time. We're doing it, a lot of us, for jobs. Because you guys are younger, when you get into the job market, it's assumed you know how to do a lot of stuff, and the fact that you can is actually going to be really helpful. So I also developed it, like there's a lot of stuff that's really helpful to know, to not have to pay someone else to do, right? And it's not hard to do it with software nowadays. We are doing Adobe software, which, full disclosure, Adobe has bought a lot of software from a lot of people and just changed its names. So they didn't really develop all this stuff like it sounds like. And they keep buying stuff, because as soon as something that's popular, well, then they want a piece of it, and then they'll just buy that company, and then it becomes a different name, same software under them. But right now, Adobe is still kind of the king of the design stuff. Everybody who's a designer uses Adobe products. So here's what to take away from that, is if you, in the end, like, aren't a designer day to day, but you still want to do designy stuff, there's a lot of cheaper software out there, and a lot of it is free, and new stuff keeps popping up. Like, if you like Illustrator but you don't want to pay their monthly fee after you're done with the class and / subscription, we'll talk about that. You don't have to. You can just use our classroom to do it. Then there's other stuff to use later, right? So you're never like, you don't have to use Adobe later, but it is the industry standard, so for us to teach something different doesn't make sense. But just know there's other stuff out there. Photoshop is probably the harder one to replicate, but there's a lot of stuff doing vectors right now. So we'll teach you basics of Photoshop, some Illustrator, a little bit of InDesign, which is very similar to Illustrator, and then we'll do a little bit of web stuff, just because that's what we deal with right now. It's just everywhere, and you can't really escape it. So this class is also an art class. So for those of you guys who didn't realize it, this is counting for your fine arts requirement if you don't yet have that figured out. Another check on your on your degree works. So this is why some of these things are in there. This is specifically about the reason why it has that attribute, is because we cover color and we color composition, we color all this stuff. It's just not physical, right? That doesn't mean it's not art. It's just a different way of having some tools. So the Fit to Core mission, I won't even cover that. You guys can read that if you want to. But basically, what I like to think of is you guys are learning enough from the class that after class is done, if you want to learn things more, then it's easier for you to go to YouTube and find things you need. If I just said, hey, I need you to make a logo in Illustrator, go for it, that would just be mean, because there's about 1 million videos on how to do Illustrator, but they're not going to be specific. You're going to have to sludge through how many to get what you really need. So basically, the more you understand software, the easier it is to find more information out. So you'll have enough information, tool names, you'll know enough that basically YouTube will be useful to you after that point, if someone like me isn't available. So let's see. So Photoshop, obviously it's in the name. It's about photos, raster-based imagery, illustration kind of stuff. Vectors can work hand in hand with Illustrator, but photos are based in pixels, right? You get what you got. You can't increase the quality. You're done, right? Whatever you took it at. Vectors can be increased. It's math, basically. So they can be massive, like on a plane, on a huge billboard. If you ever see a photograph that's a massive billboard, they have taken it into Illustrator and changed each pixel to a vector, and then they can be whatever size you want. That's how you get around that. I don't want to sign in, thank you. And then we have a little bit of stuff for HTML and CSS. If you've had coding before, it may or may not be easier. I have a specific way I want you to do it. I want you to know what you are doing, right? So I don't want you to like go randomly find something, post something, but when I ask you to edit it, you have no idea what to do. No bootstraps, no pre-done code, like you're writing it with the help, so there's a couple ways to do it, but just know in the end, if I ask you, what does that line do? You'll actually know. And if I say, I want you to change that color, you'll know where to go to do it. Even with only one assignment, like it's not difficult. It's just directions. It's just giving directions, changing some numbers. So we all do the same page for that project. You don't have to design anything. You follow along with me. And basically what you're doing it to make your own page, which is what all templates do nowadays anyway. You're going to switch out your logo. You'll switch out colors. You can change your font. So it's the aesthetics of it that you're going to change, which is the CSS, or we'll learn what that is versus this. If you know how to change code with the aesthetic part, majority of you can put that on your resume and it looks pretty good. Because content management systems like WordPress, which probably a lot of you guys have already used, Squarespace, there's so many out there, it's hard to keep track. Majority of them, if you pay a little bit more in your company, you get control over the code. So you can change those things. Yes, it's a template, but if you pay a little bit more, you get developer status, and then you can change those things. You're like, company needs a different orange than we have access to. Well, pay a little bit more per month, and now you can do whatever you want with that stuff without having to know HTML or extra code. You could at least change the look, which is the majority of what people care about. So that's where I want you to get with that. So you'll do one by hand with me, just following along really carefully, and then you'll do one that you can you can use the same information, same pictures, same whatever that you use for that, and you're gonna go put one online using, again, WordPress, etc. WordPress is still the king of content management systems. A lot of companies use them. So it helps on your resume just to say that you have knowledge of it, have used it. And for that one, if you've used WordPress before, but only as a blog, I would still say use that platform, and I'll show you, we'll just learn a little bit more about it. But there's also other options that you can do. If you don't already have a website, but you kind of need one in the near future, I would say this is the one to keep, make it for yourself. Why not? There's a lot of ways to not pay for it. I don't expect anybody to pay a thing for any of these projects, except for your book project, where you buy your own book. They'll constantly try to make you buy, oh, you probably need to do this. No, you don't have to. All of them have either free options or trial versions. You don't need to go beyond that for class. But just know that if you need one, this is the ideal time. And it's part of also why I built it in, because majority of us need a website. It's just how the world is. Even if you have Instagram and everything else, nobody wants to scroll through for 50 posts to find what they can find in 2 seconds on your website, right? It's just, you kind of still need both. And this class is required by all of the computer science, design, and journalism majors. But we have a lot of business students taking our classes also, because they need it before they can take graphic design. And so there's a pretty big mix of students. We also, if they're seniors and they got into the class before the rest of the folks and needed it for fine art credit, we might have people for that reason too. So there's a wide mix of people in this class. I assume most of you I come from the perspective that you have zero experience coming into it, right? I don't expect any foreknowledge whatsoever. We're starting from absolute scratch. If you have some foreknowledge, talk to me. We can make your projects more complicated so you can really learn something new or have something for your portfolio. But the majority of them are meaty enough where you can do good if you've never done it before, and you can do some really great things if you have, right? I don't grade based on this one looks more sophisticated than this one. It's just all about, did you follow directions? And if you got critique, did you follow the critique? Out in the world of design and everything else, you don't just get to do what you want and be done. Unless you're your own boss. But even as your own boss, you typically usually have a client, right? Changes are inevitable. You got to change things, fix things, adjust things. So what we do in class is we have a critique day for our projects. There's a difference between exercises and projects. Exercises, you just get it done to get familiar with something. Not too much is asked from you to make aesthetic decisions. It's just, this is what it is. And then the projects have more about you in them, or more of your decisions involved. And those are the ones that we look at together. Now, all along the way, you can consult with me and check in with me and, ask me the technical questions, and I'll help you as much as I can. You can also, FYI, you can send me your files if you're struggling and say, hey, I got this far. I can't figure out how to make this sky more blue, or whatever the thing is. And so if you send me, like in our first things, Photoshop, you'll send me your PSD document, your actual Photoshop document, and I'll comb through it and I'll send you a video back about how I would suggest doing it. So it's similar to what you could do in class, but if you're just like, I only have that one question, I don't know if I want to go all the way across town to ask that question, because I can do that via video too. So for most things, video is helpful. If you have a really complicated question, you're like, holy Lord, it's going to take me half an hour to write it out, the question, then either use your phone to record your situation or use a screen recording to describe what's happening, because I know it's way faster than trying to write it out. So do what you need to get your question to me so that I can give you a proper response back. But always send me your working files with all your layers. Let's see. I'm just going to go through and see which ones are the most important. So majority of the stuff, of course, we have a lot of videos that are demos. It's the majority of it. There's also built-in lectures, like you've got to learn about color and some things about form. A lot of the art stuff is still in lecture form, so there's a mix of how to do things with software versus some other things about how to make art. And that's pretty much it. And then, of course, homework. We do have homework pretty consistently almost all the time. There's also a lot of overlap. Like you finish one for critique, you have a few days to finish your final version. In the meantime, because usually the final versions only require a couple minutes of fixing. It's pretty rare that someone starts from scratch and be like, I hated what I did and I restarted. It's usually like, okay, I listened. This needs to be a little bit more of this. This needs to be a little bit more of this. You just quickly do it and submit it for the grade. Even if I usually would give you at least a couple days to a week for the final versions. But in the meantime, something else has kind of started. So there's usually a couple things at once. So our basic stuff, Photoshop. And I'll go through these visually in our Blue Line site just so it makes sense. But there's basically a few of each. And having done the programs for so long, and I know kind of like the essentials of what I want you to get from it, along with the art stuff, there is that combination of exercises and projects that just makes sense. And then usually 3 to 4 per software until we get to InDesign. I pushed it to the back end of our calendar because it's actually the easiest assignment. So basically I'll tell you guys about it, but Illustrator and InDesign are so similar that if you accidentally tap the wrong software and you meant for the other one, it'll take a couple seconds for your brain to register that you're in the other program. That's how similar they are. They do different things. They're 4 different things, but they have a lot of the same capabilities. Illustrator is where you want to do all of your graphic work, logo work, anything like that. InDesign is for books. Anything you can do posters too, but anything over a page, you do it in InDesign because you want to be able to move pages around, shift things around. Illustrator does not like you to do it. They are not pages, they're called artboards, and they are freaking frustrating to deal with. So anything more than one page, you basically can just import your Illustrator content right into your InDesign file. Illustrate your photos, all illustrations, pull into InDesign, even your raw files. What's really nice is that you'll see it in your InDesign file, like let's say you're making your book, and you're like, that doesn't look good next to that one. This one now needs to be edited to be darker or whatever. You can go to Photoshop, update it, and it automatically will update here, as long as you've got your files linked correctly. So it's a good thing to know how to do. You guys are going to make a book of your choice. Now, I want to tell you at the beginning, so if you do something more complicated than a photo book, you got to start your content right now. If you're going to do a photo book, just like a recent trip, that's easy for you to collect, maybe you start on that towards the end of the semester. But if you have to do collecting, like especially getting content from other people, start now, because it's really frustrating to start on something and not be able to finish it the way you want. These really make amazing gifts. Time and time again, people are like, it was, my mom loved it. Now it's this, like it becomes people really like them. So people do books for friends, family. I've had people write their own children's books. I've had them make their own coloring books. Somebody did all their favorite Nike shoes and drew them out in Illustrator. That was a lot of work. And then, people who like Nike shoes could buy it. It's a coloring book. You can make your books available to sell. With Blurb, which is the one I recommend for printing, you can sell directly through them, or you can sell through Amazon from them. So your books don't have to be for anybody, but you can quickly sell them online. If you know your content is something you want to sell, you have to make sure it's all completely yours, right? No borrowing from anybody, only your photos, etc. If you're using other people's photos, if you have their permission, you just need to state that so that, everything is okay. But just know it's not that hard to make a book and sell it on Amazon. You're going to see how easy it is. It takes them 3 days to get set up, and then your book is just there, ready for people to buy. So if you have questions about content, by all means, come talk to me about it. But people have done recipe books, a history of their family via photos, like old photos, new photos, etc. So it could be a really time-consuming project and might be worth spending time on, but your own schedule. You got to determine that's for later when I have a less stressful semester and I understand how books go. But at least think about it and see what you feel like you have time for. Photo books are by far the easiest. For photo books, as long as you have your photos all in a folder ready to go, you have your yes folder, you have your maybe folder, you have your no folder, and then you have some labels on them. Maybe you know what order you want them to go in, and a little bit of text. You don't need a lot of text, just a little bit at the intro. But I find I've got probably 25 years on most of you. You think you're going to remember details. I guarantee you won't. So always add little tiny descriptions to some of your photographs so you remember, because I guarantee you those little details that are really present in your mind now won't be in 20 years. They just won't. So I do encourage, you don't have to label every single photo, but say you want something specific, it's going to fade away. You'll remember the general state, not the location. So I recommend that you write little tiny blurbs basically for your photos. And as long as you have your content ready before you get your book, so that's where you can start now, the book might take you 2 hours max, as long as you have your content ready. So putting a book together is easy. It's the content that takes the time. And I will continuously remind you to please start on that. Class procedures. Okay, so technology. It fails on us, right? Don't rely on your computers. Have backups of projects that you are, most of these projects will take time. Here's my way of deciding if I should back it up. Do I want to ever do it again? Do I have to redo that work? Nope. So put it up immediately then into either your online or your external drive, whatever you have, just to have a copy of it. And then in terms of saving, save like a crazy person. Like you have a disease that makes you push save every 5 minutes because that's how often you probably need to do it. Again, I'm like, every time I change even the most tiny thing, do I want to do it again? Nope, save. So I mean, I'm older than you, so I probably have less patience now, but it is, I don't have much time anymore to do things with little kids and all, too many jobs and all that. So for me, it's painful to redo basically at this point. So just save. It amuses me, and then I'm like, oh, for folks like they're at the end of class and they're like, oh, I guess I should save that. I was like, oh goodness, that's the only time you've saved. You just spent an hour and a half on the project. Do you have an hour and a half to get back? Because tech fails. And I have a little point of advice for those of you guys using Macs. If that fan starts to go off, take your cover off. Don't keep it on anymore. They're helpful for keeping it protected, but they do overheat your machines. I have had 3 failed MacBooks in the last 15 years. I do use them a lot for video and rendering, but this is what I recommend. Feet to keep your Macs off the surface. They will overheat a lot less. These cost $8 on Amazon. Super simple. It's just a sticker. And then these things just fold down so they don't really get wrecked. But they have saved me from, I think that they extend the life probably at least a year, because overheating kills machines, wrecks the ports. You have to replace fans. It can be pretty tricky. But for Macs especially, they just overheat. It's been an ongoing issue that they haven't fixed, no matter what you do. So if you have cases. So the other thing is, depend on how you use your machine. I do use my trackpad a lot. If you use a mouse, you do it less. But here's what I do. My palm ends up resting on my machine, which is also lending some heat to my machine. So just think about how you work. Do you have a Mac? Feet, those little sticky feet are probably very, very smart for you to get. Okay, so tech-wise, covered that. Homework, just check Blue Line. We've always got some. Digital files, for the most part, there are different requirements for each project, and they do count towards your grade if you follow the directions. So some of them I do want, like all of your files. I need to check your layers because I'm asking you to like rename your layers. I need to see the order. I need to see everything in your file. So you have to turn in your finals for basically for our final submissions. But for critique versions, I typically just want a JPEG, maybe a PDF. I don't need to see everything, but it doesn't hurt to submit both, because if we have time to critique or you have a question, then I can just open it up right there and, basically give a short little lesson. So feel free to turn in more than just a JPEG or PDF for critique. Fonts, illustrations, photos. We have easy access to a lot of stuff that doesn't belong to us. I would say avoid it as much as possible. Do your own photography. Any kind of phone photography is all we need for this class. We don't need anything above that. Stock images, if it's royalty free, go for it. There's a ton of it that's royalty free. Just you can use whatever you want, or you need to pay to use other people's stuff. Just get in the habit of paying people for their work because you want to get paid for yours. But for class, there's enough royalty free stuff that I wouldn't bother. You can find it out there. All right, grading. I'm not going to go through that pain, but basically a lot of it is, did you follow the directions? That's what it comes down to. That's essentially is my rubric. I just copy the directions and I just do them like 23 times, and I essentially just do check marks. And for things that you forgot, then I just say like missing this or that. And I do give you the opportunity to redo if you really, forgot some things. It's on you if you want to resubmit. Even if it's for the final grade, I'm like, you could have done better. A lot of it is people just forgot to follow the directions and they're missing things. And so I would rather give you the opportunity to fix it than to just have you get a low grade, because you'll remember more if you fix it. Instructions. Yes, that's the majority of it. And then, did you follow critique? If a few people are like, yeah, that was hard to read, or I didn't know what that was, then you'll know like that is an area that should be adjusted. Our grading scale is here. It's the same across the whole, I think it's across the whole university. The important thing to be on time for is critiques, because that's where you're going to get feedback from other people other than me. If your final, so basically you'll have your critique version submitted on time, and I have a date for the final versions. If you're a day or so late on that, I don't count that against you. But the critiques really need to be on time so that everybody sees them. Even if you're not going to be in class, you're like, you submit it, or you haven't submitted it, you get sick, you're like, well, I have it done. Go ahead and submit it, because I'll pass on to you what students have said for critique. Attendance, like I said, since you're not here all the time, it's really important that you are here when I have the required days. Let me know if you're sick, and go to the doctor if you need to. Send me the documentation if you know you're going to be out for a while. Let's see. This is stuff. The stuff that is in every syllabus or is supposed to be, I don't cover because you guys are hear it over and over. One thing for incomplete, I feel like there's a misunderstanding about what that is. If you are sick towards the end of a semester and you honestly just are too sick, you cannot complete it. Let's say it's like the last month or the last couple weeks. You are welcome to ask. We can't offer them. You have to ask us, just so you know. I can be like, hey, it's probably a good idea that you ask for an incomplete. I'm not allowed to do that. You guys are supposed to come to us, and then we will help you do that. It's just a really simple form to do. But here's the caveat: we are allowed to give you a year from the time that the class ended. 95% of the students who do incompletes never finish them, and they end up getting either failing or getting the grade that they were assigned. So basically, you're like 3/4 through the semester, you get sick, you might have a C at that point. You have the opportunity to complete the missing work, but if you don't, you end with a C, and basically the grade on the form is what the dean's office ends up switching from an I to a C or whatever it is. So I usually recommend that the time frame for finishing the work is only a month, because you will honestly forget it. You will. I've just seen it over and over and over. And then it's just easier for you to be like, okay, I need to figure out how I'm going to get this done in a month, and then you submit and you're done. But they on the outlook, they look great, but in reality, they damage a lot of students' grades because they just get busy with the rest of the semester, and then they simply forget. What else? Class cancellation. Like I said, if I get sick or anything, I will send a message on Blue Line via announcements, so please check before you leave for class. You guys have all seen this before. It's on all of ours verbatim. We're supposed to be verbatim. So for our class, since it's hybrid already, switching to a different format is not hard for us. But that is possible should anything annoying happen out in there. Hope not. There is a new academic policy that they just updated, so take a look at that. Hopefully you're not the kind of person that ever would, so you don't feel the need to, but there is an updated one. Let's see. So software needed. I'll get to that in our Blue Line classroom because there's some information. But basically for class, you need access to a computer, which we have in the labs, and access to the software. Some sort of way to back up your files, however you deem the best for you. I recommend having a little bit of stuff to do some sketching. Not every project requires it, but it's better for you if you sketch first. And then depending on you as a person, if you get frustrated, if you can't draw a straight line, you can get a ruler. Some people are more OCD than others. And then, like I said, a lot of stuff you can do for class, you can just do on your camera, on your phone. And that's the quality is high enough for any of our purposes. My office hours are right after this class, Monday, Wednesday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, 10:45 to 11:30. But again, I can do a lot of stuff via Zoom. I'm in my office typically, although I do have meetings kind of scattered, till 2:30, which is when I leave campus to go get my kids. Anytime after that, it's a little chaotic, but I'm available for some Zooms, but my kids are guaranteed to interrupt. That's just how it is. So if you don't mind, a little hello, or maybe more than a hello. One of them likes to have conversations. Basically just email me, we'll figure something out. But again, because you can email me files and your questions, sometimes it can get solved like that. The big thing is I want you to get the questions answered so that you can move on and get your stuff done. My bio, I come from a diverse background of painting and drawing and graphic design. I would say I just don't do ceramics at this point. Anything else is up for it. If you're interested in murals, come talk to me. I help facilitate the art infrastructure project, so we did all the orbit murals, and there's a new one oncoming we did. It's this one with a very colorful background. We try to work with a lot of diverse artists, and we mentor artists who aren't yet muralists to become muralists, because we need more of them, especially people of color. There's just not a lot of people of color who are doing murals now, but they should be and they can, so we just kind of like, your work would look great big. Do you want to? But we kind of walk them through the process. We make it as easy as we can, since we're all, those of us who are doing our muralists too. We are privately funded. I'm not sure for how long. I thought it was going to be a 1-year thing when they asked us to do it, and we are now on year 3, and we have outside projects. people are coming to us and funding their own projects, let's say it that way, but we're still doing some public ones with the private funding too. I've traveled a lot. I grew up abroad. I lived abroad. I feel like it's extremely valuable to travel just because you learn a lot about yourself and what you like on the planet, what you like about living, what makes you happy, and that can really inform what you do for the rest of your life. So if you do have the opportunity to do any kind of abroad travel and you haven't, let's figure that out. If you're in the design department, FYI, we have 2 people who are abroad right now. Well, one is now, one will be. And I'm just going to do an online version of the class with them. So check with the professor before you assume that. But if it's for me, I'll make something work. So if you want to travel, but like our classes are in the way, talk to the, abroad folks and talk to us. We'll get something figured out. But I really do feel like it's a very important part if you can make it happen. All right, I'm going to show you our calendar before I move on to the blue line. Here it is. This is my very carefully constructed calendar that honestly I couldn't live without because it is confusing to do a hybrid and to like know exactly what days, all that stuff. So here's what it looks like. I'll make it even bigger. Basically, this is our Mondays, and then this is our Wednesdays. It felt weird our calendar gets really, really crazy skinny and too long, so I basically just keep the Tuesday in there. But I have attendance required in yellow, so that's easy to spot. Any day that's in yellow, you need to be here. Make sure you mark it in your calendar. And if I do sometimes update these. Every once in a while, little weird things happen. I will let you know that it's been changed, and I'll put what date it's changed, etc. There are some days, obviously, we don't have class on Monday, and then I have pink for finals or midterms. So these other days that are not colored means these are work days. And exercises and final versions of projects, I just have due on at midnight. If it's a little later than that, it doesn't matter to me. But I like to have things due on a class day. It's just easier for everybody. Like if it's a Monday or Wednesday, it's probably something due for me. It's just a little easier. And then, for Pete's sake, I try to which project you should be working on at the same time. This day, I will send you out a list of what time you need to meet with me. Now, if you instead want to meet with me on this day and you're in class, you can just check that off your list and we don't need to meet this day. But I basically want to make sure that if you have questions about one of your photos that you'll be working on, that you have the opportunity to check in with me. And then we look at it for critique, and then I'll kind of introduce color at the same time. This one ends up probably usually being more of a show and tell. For our first thing that we do, it's a photo exercise. It's just get you acclimated to Photoshop, do a bunch of things for editing to oh, okay, I get it. And then after you get a little bit of an idea how it works, then we begin our first project, which is you take 3 photos, and I'll show you some examples, that are not the same. And you make them similar enough that they look like they were supposed to go together in the first place. So it's a little different than these go together. No, these don't go together, but how do they have enough of a relationship that they look like they should have been together? So you will edit things like your contrast, your colors, multiples of things to make them become a set. I heavily recommend that you send me 5 photos ahead of time. I'll just flat out let you know that one is too difficult to fit in with the rest. Don't even go there for this first project. This is a more complicated advanced editing thing that you don't want to tackle for this one. I'll be this one works. You basically, let's say that you have 3 landscape photos. There needs to be probably a couple greens, maybe in 2 of them that could get similar. Maybe 2 blues over here that yeah, those I could match. But if you're trying to make a yellow become blue, why do that to yourself? Start with some colors that already have at least a bit of a relationship and then work from there. So I do recommend that you send those to me before you begin, just because it'll make your life a lot easier. Or show me in class, right? You guys can be in class on the non-required days and we can work on it. So you guys can just basically see the layout. Yellows, and they're not consistent, right? Because there's certain things we got to do that aren't in a perfect pattern. They just... When we get down here, we need to meet a bunch, but then we don't really meet for the rest of the semester. So it's it's you can't really predict it. So this is why we have to have this calendar. So just download it, keep it handy. It is on our Blue Line site. I already have when our final exam period is. Basically, for final exams, we don't have to have an exam. We can have a final project. I just have a reflection paper due, but it has to be due at the time of the exam. That's how they allow that kind of stuff. So that's our exam period day. So that's when you'll have just a little reflection paper. I should even honestly cross out the paper part because it's not very long. It's not really paper. I just want you to reflect on what you learned. Does it have any impact on you? Can you see how it? At this point in time, I can't see how knowing more about images again is going to hurt any career that you're in. It's just going to help, right? So, reading day. I want all the faculty should know this, but sometimes I've noticed that they don't. There should be no class on this day. So make sure that your professors don't have that, right? It specifically says on the academic calendar, no class. It's reading day. So I'll have your book due at the end of that Monday. Now, if this book rolls in more like the end of the semester, I'm okay with that. It's not great. It's not critiqued. It's just your book. You can make your book whatever you want. So only I'm going to ever see it, or whoever you're publishing it for. Yourself or other people. We have Easter, one day for Easter off, but the rest of it is just spring break. Now let's travel over to Blue Line and really get a better sense of this stuff. So first things first, we do have a lot of folks in the class, so it's helpful to introduce yourself, because you can tell me now and I won't remember. So if I have time to read it, it sticks in my head a lot better. Here's our syllabus. This is that calendar that I just showed you. And I want to talk now about the Adobe software. So it is your choice whether or not you want to purchase. It's not really purchase. They call it a subscription. Basically, your access to Adobe costs if you want to do it on your own. It's more convenient, right? But it is a cost. You can choose just to use the labs. You have the only time that you don't have access is when we're on breaks. They shut the buildings down. But if you plan for it, you should be fine. So 203 is our tiny little classroom over there. 204 is behind us, and then this is 205. So the classrooms are busy, and pretty soon they'll send me they make like a roster on the door with all the times that they're open and closed, and then I add that to our classroom. But what I would say is just take a photograph of those sheets when you do see them up, so that you can know, okay, this will just be part of my routine. I'm going to go to classrooms, at this time. Weekends they are open too. Fridays are like dead around here. We have so few classes, so you could bring a friend, work in here, just use the day. We have one faculty meeting a month, and it's in here, but you'll see us in here or we'll kick you out if you're here. We usually meet around noon. So first, you just got to decide: do I want the inconvenience, but be frugal and only use the labs? If you want to do the subscription, you need to understand that it's a year-long subscription. You can cancel it, but they will charge you to cancel it. It's still cheaper than completing your subscription, but it's not a small number. It is all dependent on when you ask to cancel. It's based on the amount you have left in your subscription. You do need to use your school ID email, because that's how they kind of know that you're a student, right? There's student pricing. Now, when you get the subscription, just FYI, it's for everything. They have different levels of subscriptions. They have one that's just for Photoshop. Do not get that one. That doesn't do you any good, because you're going to need more than that. But make sure that you are on the correct plan. You need the one that's special for students. So it's $20 a month, $240 all at once. But remember, it is per year, and I'm pretty sure they'll just roll you. You'll have to purposely cancel it, as most things. They just kind of keep rolling you in. And let's just take a look at it real quick. So the normal price, if you were out of school, is $55 a month. So it is a good deal, but it is a year, right? So that's where you just got to decide. I have had students that are like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be frugal. I'm going to keep my money. Screw you, Adobe. And then like halfway through the semester, they're like, I don't want to go over to Hitchcock. So, you can always add the subscription later. It's, you can do whatever you want. You don't need this free trial of Adobe stock. But basically, anything that they have available right now is, even beta versions, you have access to. So you just have to make that decision. Do you pay them $20 or $240 basically for a year, or do you just stick to our labs? And then even if you are using your laptop most of the time, I would still heavily encourage you to come and use bigger monitors, because it is way more fun to work big than small. Even sometimes I don't have a bigger monitor at home, but I will come here during breaks just to work on these, because it's just a different experience. Especially if I'm editing video. It's a lot to cram into one screen. All right, go back to Blue Line. So that's the important part. Feel free to come and talk to me about the whole Adobe thing. And then how to log into Adobe on a lab computer. Basically, we use your same, when you register for the class, somebody, I don't know who, somebody on campus registers you for an Adobe account. So somebody is paying Adobe, if it's not you. But unfortunately, it doesn't transfer over to your laptop. It has to be like on a computer here. So you log into the computer with just like your blue ID like you do for everything else. And then there's a little tiny icon, this guy right up here in the corner. So for mine, it's right here. And then you just click on it, and that's how you log into theirs. And it's the same thing. It's still your blue ID and password. If you try to launch something like Photoshop without logging in, it's just going to prompt you there to log in. So it's like you'll log in either way, but if you want to, you can just do it right as you log in. So that's it. It's nothing too fancy. It's just you have to log in twice is the annoying thing. Yeah, that's all. And also, since these are Mac things, if you want to use the computers, but you just haven't worked much on a Mac, I can give you like a quick tutorial of how Mac basically works. What else? Oh, okay. Midterm information, it's already here. So everything you need to know for the midterm is already listed. We're going to be learning 6 main color schemes, so you need to know these. Basically, I have little images of like some sets of colors, and you just have to match which one. It's just matching. And then I have principles and elements of design. So, like color, texture, those kinds of things. Is it a principle or is it an element? And these are like, these PDFs are other places, but just to make it easy, I posted them here again. And then I have, we don't really get far enough with Illustrator to do any part of the midterm on it. What's happening is, because I assume that Photoshop, all this stuff is new, we go slower. It might not seem like it, but we do go slower for the first part of the semester, and then it speeds up because you know more and nothing feels as intimidating basically at that point. So we only really get through Photoshop module in time for midterm. Midterm's also kind of early. It's like it's early, end of February. Very first day of March kind of a thing, so we don't have time to get through a ton of it. So for Photoshop, what happens is I give you instructions, and you basically create a file. I give you a photo to use, and you have to make a clipping mask, you have to use some blending modes, and you have to do some adjustments. That might look like gobbledygook right now, but after you've done a couple projects, you're like, yeah, I know how to do it. So there's a hands-on one, and you just submit your PSD file, and then there's the matching one, which probably takes, 5 minutes. In all, people are usually done with about 45 minutes. They're out the door. And let's see if I can pull this up again. I did our midterm on a Monday, just in case you want to extend your spring break a tiny bit. I don't know what your other teachers will do, but I always try to bump that to the beginning of the week if I can. Okay, so that's that part. I just want you to know it's already there. So just if you forget, just go to this stuff. And then there's a few things that we're doing as discussion posts, and those you don't have to do much in terms of responses. I just want people to see the work. They're exercises, so we don't require critiques, but it's just fun to see again, like how are other people doing that? Like, here's how I did mine. Here's how, So, but a lot of times people are attaching their images instead of embedding them. So it's easier for posts if you embed your JPEG into it. So as you're scrolling, you can see it. So this is just a reminder of how to do that if you haven't done that before for a post. Nothing fancy. It's just instead of attaching an image, you upload it. All right, so those are some of the how you get through things. And then in the remainder, I just want to walk you through visually what you guys will be doing, so you can kind of anticipate it. What is okay to do in this class is that for some of them, they can kind of build. Like this can become for this, and then this can become for this. Like if in the end you're going to be doing your own website, well then make your logo for your website, or you could use the logo project to make a cover for your book. Like there's ways where you can manipulate the projects enough where they kind of become bigger at the end, especially the project, maybe not so much the exercises. So for this first adjustment exercise, this is just like grab a photo and make different things happen, right? I'm just like, here, do this to this, do this to this, just to acclimate you to how you do things. Those of you guys who have already edit images, like, even through your social media apps, like you're like, oh yeah, I get this. Like, I already know how to do this. I already know how to do this. Sometimes what you might want to do is if you have a favorite filter, try to make it happen with Photoshop. See what it takes. Oh, you have a lot of yellow. Oh, you don't really have much blue. Like there's way you can decrease, increase, do it until you're like, oh, I got that 70s one down or whatever. it's possible. So this is just watch the video, follow along, choose your favorite image, and go from there. And then the series of 3 is the one that at first glance can be confusing because that's the one where you're really choosing things that are not the same. But again, not so very different that you can't make them match. They do need to have color in them. Black and whites just don't have enough flexibility. All they have at that point is contrast. That's just not enough. You can do saturation changes, so something can be really quiet, almost black and white, but not quite. And then so you'll end up choosing 3 different adjustment layers, which are like basically your basic editing requires 3 adjustment layers, so it's super simple. But I want to just show you some examples from class. So, they can be from the same place. This one happens to be, but I'll show you the originals. They didn't match before. And they don't have to be super realistic. You could hypercolor them. You could all the skies are super pink. Okay. Do whatever you want. Alien planet kind of thing is fine. As long as they match, that's all that I care about. So you're matching contrasts, you're matching some colors. Not all 3 have to have the same color matching though. They do all need to have same contrasts. That means the same amount of whites, like the dark feels the same density. Like you can call black in all of them, or you don't even have to say black. Maybe they're all purposefully desaturated, and the darkest color you have is a dark blue. There's lots of different ways to do this. Background colors can be really important, so that's why you're seeing some with color and some without, and that's something people will spend more time on than you realize. Because it really has an impact. Like certain photographs, like even those on the wall, they're popping on the gray, and the gray's not dark, but the light is popping on there. If you had a white, they would just blend, and they wouldn't have as much impact. So your background color, if you guys have gone to bigger museum exhibitions, they often paint those walls. And sometimes it doesn't look great for every single piece, but it's meant to be and they add drama. Like gold frames look great on purple and blue. Surprise! You'll find that out when we do the color stuff. But there's, small value changes that you can do. So anyway, white is okay for some, but only if you have pure white in your photos does that actually look good. If you don't, or if you have a lot of white, a color background is going to look better. So I would think of this as 3 photographs that are going to go together on a wall. What color should that wall be for the best look of the photos, basically? How do you do those photos justice? You can mix and match areas like flowers, a person, whatever, architecture. They don't have to be subject matter related. Again, your color work will make them match. This one, they're all darker. Does that mean they're bad? If they were on white, they'd look bad. But the fact that they're on a dark background and makes the lights come forward, that's the look he wanted, so he went with it. All desaturated, right? There's no pure white in this one. So again, white isn't the best option for the background. It wouldn't make sense. They would feel dull. But they don't feel dull. And this can't be on a black background because there's no black, there's only dark gray. This one, super high contrast and there's white in these, but no white in this one. So white's maybe a good option for 2, but not for that one. So anyway, you see backgrounds are a little trickier. And then, again, subject matter-wise, all over the place. Here's the one thing I don't recommend. People in all 3. It's really hard to match skin tones. Even in the same person as in each photograph, the lighting drastically changes flesh tones, and it is not fun to match them. So go ahead and do a person for one of them, but I do not recommend for your first editing to do people in all 3. It just is going to be harder than you want to tackle. So for this one, you will choose a way to present 3, right? There's no one way. You could crop them all to squares. You can, mix and match verticals and horizontals, but you want it to feel purposeful. Like even that back one's not awesome, but at least there's a tall one, a shorter one, and like there's some semblance of some kind of order. But there's a ton of different ways. I think I might have covered all of them, but if not, try another one. Show it to me. Vertical is okay. Horizontal is okay. You are welcome to do up to 3 to 5, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's a lot to tackle on your first round of editing. So you can rotate, crop. But this is kind of important to note as you're thinking about which photographs, because if you want all squares, but some don't crop well the squares, choose a different image. So we'll get through this, but I just wanted to show you a couple visuals of what that looked like. This is the one on where it goes from that, these are the originals, to what they ended up with. So she really pulled reds out. She wanted red present in each of them. And I think she borrowed some of the cyan that was here and really pushed it. Added red, like there was a little semblance of red, but boy, she pushed it. So this one is heavily manipulated, but they look really nice together. And they are all Minneapolis, but there was still editing work done. They also increased like the contrast here. They brightened it up. They added contrast here. So it takes work. She also ended up having to crop them because you can see like this one was taller for some reason than the other ones. So what happens is that this project, there's a lot of work that people don't notice that goes into this project. I will see though, because I'm going to look at all of your Photoshop layers, so I'll know, the kind of work that you did, which is why I asked to see your final file for that. All right, so that's one of the bigger projects. We're going to do a color scheme one. I'm not going to open that up right now because that's more of an exercise, but that's another one where you'll post it just so people can see what you did. But you basically learn a bunch of basics about color, value. There's a lot packed into this assignment. I will say sometimes it maybe seems small, but in the end, you guys are going to come up with one composition, just one, and you basically duplicate it 6 times. And then you'll change the colors based on the color scheme you're trying to do. But at the same time, I'm also asking you to make sure that there are at least one tint, one tone, one shade, which means a very dark color that has black, a color that has gray mixed in, and then a color that has white mixed in each of them. And you can do them like, my background's always going to be the light one. You can kind of like keep a system, or you can do whatever you want. Some people will just choose to do 6 different ones, and that's okay. But it's better on your time if you just make one you like, and then the only caveat for what you choose is for a sense of depth, it only takes overlapping. That's it. You don't need anything else. The moment you have an overlap, we get depth. So that's a requirement. You have to have at least a little bit of depth, unless you do a pattern. Patterns are their own thing. You just need to be symmetrical and formal. You can try to overlap in a pattern, but that does not require. You can just do a simple pattern. And then what you'll also find, there's actually 3 different color wheels. Most of you are familiar with one. That's what you were taught when you were in kindergarten. Fuck that thing. It's wrong. So wrong. It leads people down a color mess, and it frustrates them because they don't understand color from it. I don't swear very often, but that's how much I hate how we teach color, because it really sets people on the wrong path. And honestly, all the way up to HGTV, those people do not use the right terms. It's really confusing for regular people. Like, I want a shade of yellow. I'm like, then you're going to get an olive color. That's not yellow. When they say shade of yellow, they just mean a variation of it. You know, they use terms that I like HGTV, but I hate HGTV because it just sets off all my red alarms. So you'll learn terms properly, and then it's going to annoy you because no one else uses them properly, and you're going to have to explain yourself. But basically, traditional, there's red, yellow, green, right? So if you have a red and you have a yellow and they give you a blue, sure, you can mix muddy versions of a green and muddy versions of a violet, but you're never going to get pure color. The only way to do that is to start with magenta, because from magenta you can mix red. You will never get magenta from red. It already has yellow in it. You can't subtract. So traditional, it has its purposes, but not very many. The additive is what we see on screen. Millions more colors than we can ever like produce physically. Beautiful, but hypercolor, like super intensely bright. And now with like painting technology, we can get some of those colors, but it's a little harder. Subtractive is what we use out in the world. That's where printing comes from. That's how we mix our colors for walls. That's what we use. And you guys majority of you guys still have used at some point in your life an inkjet printer, right? Do you remember the colors that are in there? Yep. So we got magenta, which is like your super bright pink. Cyan, which is like a sky blue, probably the closest equivalent. Yellow, which is, that one's hard to mess up. And then we have K, which is black. From those, you can mix any color on the planet. Any color. When I paint, it's all I need. I can teach people to mix any color on the planet. But if you give me the wrong set of colors from Blick, those people should be harmed by how badly that they do their job. You can still find cyan, magenta, and yellow, black, but you're not going to find them in the sets like you should. It makes people get frustrated with art, which really frustrates me because art is one of the best ways to relax, have fun, and it's not cool that they get released from that. And then we'll just have some basic color wheels. So there's a lot packed into this assignment. So give yourself some time to do it. But again, I'll just be right there. So it's not something we'll critique, but it was something we'll look at. The collage, this one can be, let's just say I use the term collage very loosely. Just means a few elements together, in my opinion. So if you're like, no, I like minimalism, I'm a graphic designer, fine, go that direction. If you're like, nope, I want to make it look like my 5-year-old niece made it with me, you go for it. Colors can be crazy, content can be crazy or funny, it does not have to be serious. Some people draw their own things, some people pull in their own drawings and digitally color them. But honestly, anything under the sun is okay for this project. Probably unless it's sacrilegious. Probably can't say that that's okay. But anything else is, like, I know that this little drawing, that was a person's drawing. She did this one completely, digitally. This one was a big project they had on their wall, and they photographed it. Like, each piece was an individual art piece from something that they did, and this became part of their art project. So the goal of this one is to just learn Photoshop more. You're going to be trying a lot of things. You have to have some text. You had to do this. But if you don't love those aspects, you can turn the opacity almost all the way down to 0, like at least 5% so I can kind of see them. But I also asked to see your original file, so if I'm like, where the hell did they put that? I can find it in your layers, and then I'll know that you used it. So it's just another way to learn Photoshop, but you can make something pretty fun in the process. And then the only thing is that you have to choose one of the color schemes that we did for the color scheme project to pull into this one. So you can start thinking about what that one might look like. There's a basics exercise for Illustrator just to get you acclimated, and then we're going to do a still life project, and that one does take more time. It's a lot to learn. Illustrator is all about the pen tool, and not like the Apple Pencil or anything like that. It's about vectors work with points, and so you have to learn how to curve them, how to work with them, how to add, how to minus, and then also how to maybe take a circle that already is made and then add your own and then merge them together and they become a new thing. So I have you guys follow along. how to do an exercise. So I provide the photo and just you basically follow along and you learn how to do some things. And then from there, which is right around midterm, you will be able to decide what to do for your own still life. So you will take a photo of your own stuff, have to be at least 3 objects, and then you have to use at least 15 colors, but colors in this case, it's not like 15 hues. There's some other terminology you use. So I'm not talking like a yellow and a yellow orange and then a yellow this. No, it just means like you could have almost monochromatic, just 15 different variations of a color is okay, or a hue. But basically you set up your own, and you can make it look really traditional, like a Baroque still life, or you just grab the objects around you. Instagram breakfast, kind of an idea, that's fine too. And the goal for these is basically to simplify them down. And then depending on your personality, some of you guys will get OCD and you'll want to add a lot more detail. Some of you guys will be like, that's good enough. But this one is pretty fun. Like those bacon strips, that's pretty good, but it's just squiggles in the end on top of a irregular shape. There's even tiny little bubbles in the chocolate milk. Those are just circles, right? So it's learning how to simplify in a lot of ways, and also just how to really understand how to use your tool. I'm not expecting this from you all. This person took it above and beyond. There's a lot of gradients and there's a lot of like this person loved this project. Can you tell? They got into every detail. This is probably more typical, right? I do require, again, something overlapping to create a sense of depth, because you don't need depth in any other way. There doesn't have to be shadows. There doesn't have to be kind of tonal variation. Just flat colors are fine. So a lot of people just literally just dig on their desk or through their backpack and find things that represent them. One way to do it, if you're not sure how, is to make it like a still life of you, but you're not in it. Like what objects represent you in time right this moment, and then that might make it easier. This one, they went for a more traditional still life idea. This one, when I talk about 3 objects, this is way more than 3 objects. This flower has petals, it has leaves. Then they went ahead and put, a cup. Just the flowers alone in a cup would have been plenty. This is extra, basically. So some of your objects, if they're complicated, talk to me to make sure you're not overdoing the assignment. I had some people do like little figurines, and they, like head, shoulders, torso. All those pieces are complicated. Like if you it's not an orange, right? Like that's a lot of pieces. So I will try to help guide you into not overdoing it. There's also ways you're like, that could work. Focus on this. If you have time, then do this, like in your photograph. Overhead views are great. So again, any kind of look you want. Shadows are really easy to do if you light your stuff correctly. Strong lighting is your friend if you want to attempt shadows. And one solid light source is much easier than having 2. So, overhead is okay, but if you have a bright window that you can set your things in, that will help a lot. And they're very easy to do. You just draw the shape, and then you tell it to blur. It's not that hard. You can even add a gradient and tell it to blur. So they seem complicated, but these things are not required. You're welcome. And then let's see, what other visual one can I show you real quick? Okay, so you guys know what brand logos are, so I won't need to walk through that. But basically, come up with a logo of your own. It could be, just so again, you guys can start thinking about it now. We'll learn a little bit about the printing process first. But basically, there's 2 basic kinds of logos. We've all seen them every day. Logo type, that's in the word. You already know what I mean when I say it. It's based in text only. Sometimes there's a little bit of an image implied, but it's basically text. And a logo mark is probably, like, we can all probably visualize these texts, but they're boring. They don't have any personality really, because the personality goes to the symbol. So usually the accompaniment for most of these is probably Helvetica, but just a super simple font. Alone, it's not special. The specialness comes from the mark. So you can choose which way or the other. Your text can be super fancy and edited and really carefully created, or your symbol can be. It's hard to do both together. They often start to be too much. Like you're like, that's a lot to absorb. Subtle things are okay. Majority of these have been very carefully edited. They just still look plain, like, for the text that goes with it. So just start thinking about which view. regarding those, I think having a real client is your best approach. Now, whether they know you're their client or not doesn't really matter. Maybe it's like a friend of yours is planning on a specific business when they graduate. Do a fake logo for them. Maybe it becomes real later. But when you know the client, it's easier. But you can be your own client, right? So if you don't have a logo or a mark yet, go for it. It's a good time to think about it. Even if you're a ways off, you can still start to think about that process of branding. And that's all I'll show today, because the book can mean anything under the sun. So and I can show you a couple books that people printed. They just grabbed a couple of mine and put them in the case, but they look awesome. Basically, the books don't look like home printed or anything like that. Nobody would know unless you tell them that they are self-published. So I know we're at our end time. Think of questions you have, review the syllabus in more depth, and then let me open up that calendar real quick. So we don't have class on Monday, but I would advise you to start opening up the videos about Photoshop in the meantime. And then I'll be present to help with the exercise on the 18th, or to help with whatever questions you have, or you can work from wherever you want if you're going to download the software onto your own machines. But for the next 2 days, we won't meet. You'll do that first exercise, and then you'll start working on your series. But remember, I heavily recommend that you send me your images before you start your editing process, so I can just walk you through that. Send at least 5. That way I have some choices for you. If you only send me 3, it's just easier to help you if you send me more. All right, everyone, thank you. Come up, ask questions if you have them. I'll start taking attendance next week.